All right, we are joined right now by John Kirby, the White House National Security Communications Advisor. And John, it's always good to have you, and thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, you bet, Neil. Good to be with you.
Let me ask you a little bit about this escalating tension in the Middle East and the hope that maybe Hamas and Israel coming to some sort of a ceasefire agreement will prevent whatever Iran wants to do. That doesn't look likely, though. Iran's foreign minister has vowed retaliation over the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Iran only last month, and vows to make sure Israel pays. That seems to imply Hamas ceasefire deal with Israel or not. Am I reading that accurately?
I think it's very difficult to know exactly what the Iranians are thinking on any given day, Neil. I mean, they remain prepared and postured should they want to conduct some sort of large-scale attack on Israel. That's why we remain prepared and postured to defend against that attack and to defend our own troops and facilities in the region. You know, we've got a couple of carriers here now. There's other assets in both air and ground-based available to us. So we're postured and prepared should we need to do that. We obviously don't want to see that outcome. We don't want to see another night like we saw on late Saturday night over the weekend, and certainly nothing that would be more severe coming from Tehran, which is why, again, we are prepared militarily should it come to that. But also it's why we're working so hard in Cairo to see if we can get this ceasefire in place and to get the war to stop, at the very least for 6 weeks or so we can get hostages out and we can get more humanitarian assistance in. Now, we have not seen Iran be willing to act on some of that rhetoric that you just cited. We have been consistently sending messages to them, not just in words but in deeds, that they shouldn't do that. We don't want to see that outcome.
Still, I'm a little confused, John. I know the president took vacation last week in California after the Democratic convention. He's adding another week to that in Rehoboth, Delaware this week. How engaged is he in any of this?
He's very engaged, Neil. I mean, you know as well as I do, the President of the United States, wherever they are, have access to all the communications and all the advisors that they need. I mean, he was being updated on the attacks over the weekend in real time by his national security team. He was on the phone with Prime Minister Modi today talking about Ukraine. And last week, he made several calls to try to make sure that we could get these ceasefire talks off to a good start. He's watching things very, very closely.
Is anyone watching it with him, like Kamala Harris?
I'm sorry, anybody?
Is the vice president helping him watch this?
Oh, absolutely. The vice president's team, and she has a national security team that's devoted to her as well. They're staying up to speed on all this as well. There's no question about that. But that would be the normal case, right, no matter what. I mean, and look, I want to say one more point there, because I just talked about phone calls, but you talked about the president's engagement. He's personally engaged, absolutely at the leader level on numerous occasions in just the last couple of weeks to see if we can get this ceasefire deal in the works. I mean, when he feels like it's the time for him to pick up the phone and call, he'll pick up the phone and call. And he's got relationships with these leaders such that they'll answer that call and they'll talk to him about it.
But, you know, today is the 3rd anniversary of that Abbey Gate attack that killed 13 of our servicemen. And I know you've addressed that today by saying today our longest war is over, but our commitment to preventing attacks on the homeland, our people, will never be. But as you know, John, a lot of people hearken back to Joe Biden saying that the truth is I'm the only president of this century, this decade, that doesn't have any troops dying anywhere in the world like he did, referring to Donald Trump, when in fact that was the case. And besides those 13 who died, 2 Navy SEALs who were killed in January of 2024 while attempting to board a ship bound for Yemen. And he has never clarified it himself or apologized for those remarks himself. I know he offered praise and recognition of these soldiers' bravery 3 years ago, but he has never corrected the record to say, I was wrong and I was callously wrong.
What he was referring to, and he understands that there were family members that you know, that didn't like that, but what he was referring to was the fact that he ended America's longest war and that we don't have American troops, you know, on the ground in major ways fighting overseas wars. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have troops in harm's way. Of course we do. We have some in Iraq, we have some in Syria, we have some at sea, and certainly we have some in the air every single day, and he knows that.
But it's very little comfort, right, to those families, John, and I don't want to extend this beyond what you yourself have tried to clarify, but the president himself, if you make an incorrect statement, and you keep making that incorrect statement, is he compelled himself, wherever he is, vacationing or not, to say, I was wrong to miss this obvious point about no soldiers dying under my watch?
The president was making a larger point about ending our longest war.
Yeah, but they're
no
a
other
large
commander-in-chief.
point, right, John? They're a large point.
He also recognizes, Neil, that nothing he can say, particularly on a day like today, when we should be remembering the 13 who were killed at Abbey Gate, nothing he can say is going to assuage their grief, their sorrow. Nothing he's going to be able to say or do is going to make them feel better about losing their loved ones, except be the best commander-in-chief that he can be, which is, of course, what he has been trying to do for the last 3.5 years, taking troops out of Afghanistan, ending a war for the mission for which had long been accomplished. And I don't think any American today would look at what we're seeing today and say, well, I wish we had thousands of troops back in Afghanistan. We've been able to keep take terrorists out, to hold them to account without having a large ground force there, and now rededicate and repurpose our troops and our military capability to the kinds of threats like what we're seeing in the Middle East that we really need to be much more focused on.
You know, John, I don't want to belabor the point, but you explained things very, very clearly. I'm sure you advise the president when it's called and necessary, and it's quiet, it's under QT between the two of you. I understand that. But did you ever feel compelled to say, Mr. President, this doesn't go far enough?
I won't talk about my private conversations with the president, as you alluded to there, Neil. Let me just assure you and everybody watching that no commander-in-chief understands what military families are going through better than Joe Biden, and no commander-in-chief has worked harder than he has over the last 3.5 years to make sure that they know that we have a sacred obligation to them and their families, and we're going to try to meet those sacred obligations. Even
when you say that deaths didn't happen under his watch, it's such a major faux pas and an incorrect statement to feel compelled to say, yes, you wound down a war, and there's criticism of how that wound down, I understand, but never to clarify that. I was wrong. I'm sorry.
Again, I'm not going to talk about my private conversations with the president. I would never do that under any circumstance. I would just tell you he was making a larger point about ending our longest war and not getting us into new ground wars like in Ukraine or like in Gaza. That's the larger point that he was making. And again, I think if you just look at his record on veterans and the military, you can see how much he and the First Lady really deeply care about the struggles, the sacrifices, and the service of the men and women who serve us in uniform.
Well, I still have you, John. 90% of these Hezbollah rockets were launched from civilian locations north of Israel. 90%. So that begs the question whether Israel's response to where those rockets were launched, or from where they were launched, would invariably hit civilian areas, because that's where the rockets were being launched. And what is the administration's position on that?
Well, we'll let the Israelis talk about their operations and what they did to protect themselves. Clearly, they felt the need to get ahead of what they saw was coming from Hezbollah. This is something we've been watching closely as well. We certainly had indications that Hezbollah was serious about the threats that they were making publicly. The Israelis should speak to what they hit and why they hit it and how they did it. The fact that groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, quite frankly, have no bones about using civilian sites and civilian locations and residential neighborhoods to plan to resource their operations just shows you the kind of threat that Israel's up against here. Now, we don't want to see this war escalate. Everything we've been trying to do since the 7th of October has been to prevent that outcome. The president and the whole national security team is committed to that, and we're going to stay closely lashed up with our Israeli counterparts as they continue to work to defend themselves.
All right, we'll watch it closely. John Kirby, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.